Hello YouTube. In this video we're going to explore a corner of the internet that I haven't really touched on the channel yet. I made videos about Reddit, I made videos about YouTube of course, about nattyornot.com, but we never really spoke about 4chan, and that's a little bit strange because I spent a large amount of time on the chans and all of the advice that I give, all of the things that I share were actually molded there. And even though I do think that the place is not what it used to be, I do believe that the spirit of 4chan, and especially the fitness page, was something that was very beneficial in terms of influence or advice at some point. Nowadays, I would highly discourage you from actually spending any amount of time on there because you're only going to get garbage advice. Or if you do get advice, it's going to be a mix of so many things that is going to confuse you. But there used to be a time where if you wanted to learn how to lift and you didn't want to get, again, contradicting information or you didn't want people trying to sell you stuff, you had to go on 4chan Fit because you knew that people on there wouldn't try to deceive you. Of course, there was always the occasional troll of someone who was going to misguide you for the heck of it, but it was still a good place. And I'm happy to say that even though this atmosphere is not really there anymore, there still remains a certain document that contains all of the information and the wisdom that this place had accumulated throughout the years. If you ever go on 4chan Fit and you ask a question, the first thing you're going to hear is, read the fucking sticky. Meaning that before you can ask for details or extra information, you're going to be told and you're going to be directed towards a certain document, a document that apparently is going to contain everything you would ever need to learn about lifting. And in most cases, this means that if you actually read the fucking sticky, you wouldn't have to ask the question at all because the question would be answered. Well, today I want to actually take a good look at 4chan's sticky and see if it's actually that good. See if it can actually serve as a Bible for people who want lifting information. And so, throughout this video, I'm going to peruse said sticky, and I'm going to point out the things that I think are good, the stuff that I think is bad, and some of the things that still to this day make me laugh, because you will see that the person who wrote that sticky truly believed that they were holding on to some certain of absolute truth, and I do believe that myself, I carry a certain degree of that. That is pretty much commonplace with people who make videos or give information, especially about fitness. We all think that we know everything and we all think that what we preach is the right way. Well, let's compare my way to the sticky way. And we're going to start with the myths, because the first thing that the sticky attempts to do is to debunk some common myths. And some of them I actually agree with, some of them I disagree. The first one is that lifting weights turns you into Hulk. I'm certain that for yourself, especially if you're female, when you started lifting, you had people tell you, be careful. If you lift too much, you're going to get too bulky. It's not going to be aesthetic. Or even worse, you had friends telling you they didn't want to lift too much because they didn't want to blow up and become huge. As if it were even possible. I think we would all be rejoiced if it only took a few curls to have biceps like Schwarzenegger, but sadly for us, it's not that easy. It's something that is going to take years and years. That is something that the Fit Sticky understands perfectly. But it puts the emphasis on women, and I think it's important because I don't know many dudes who would actually get discouraged from lifting weights because of that. You always have the guy who wants to remain slim or be toned for some reason, but amongst guys, it's fairly common to want to be big. For women, however, it can be very easy to be discouraged when someone tells you that you're going to look like She-Hulk. But the good thing is that this is absolutely impossible. As the sticky points out, a girl cannot get big from lifting weights, or at least not like a man, because they simply do not possess the characteristics to blow up in terms of muscle size. Which also means that strength training becomes accessible for both genders, but also extremely beneficial for both, even though it's going to create some different responses. the more you lift as a female, the more your glutes are going to round, the more your hamstrings are going to be well developed, the more your quads are going to shape. You're going to have a fitter core, a tighter core. You're going to have more toned, even though that's a buzzword, arms. All of which are going to make you look more feminine. Because even though muscle is technically an anabolic and androgenic quality, it doesn't mean that women cannot develop muscles. And muscles on a girl also look good because it does make you look more like a girl, because these are feminine muscles, quote unquote. As long as you don't take drugs, there's absolutely no problem with that. And for a male, it's the same thing. The more you lift as a guy, the more you're going to look masculine because the more muscular you're going to become. So that is absolutely true, and something that keep in mind that Sticky was published a long time ago. It's a document that's been existing for more than a decade. So it was ahead of its time when it came out. It truly pointed out something that was very important for people to hear. It also debunked some of the myths that the magazines were propagating. Keep in mind that YouTube and Reddit and all of these platforms now are the successors of what used to be the only source of information for bodybuilding, which is the magazines. And if you think that the type of information you get nowadays on YouTube Fitness is bad, you should see the type of wild shit that was available back then in those magazines. It was horrendous. 90% of the information was incorrect, it was gimmicky stuff, and the worst of the worst was, of course, magazines that were focused towards women, or they were told that they should never lift heavy weights, that they should just do body weight, and even that was too much, which led again to a generation of women who thought that doing yoga and stretching and doing jogging once a week was enough. But the issue is that women need muscle mass to stay healthy and mobile just as much as men. Hello, kitty. And therefore, it is very important that this message was also spread so that they would hear it and they would develop their muscle mass as well. Do you want to make an appearance? Maybe. Okay, we'll see. Now, when it comes to these magazines as well, and the message of the Sticky, there's one thing I must disagree with. I perfectly agree with the idea that the way women approached weightlifting was bad, but the problem I see nowadays is that it went from lifting pink dumbbells and doing just any type of aerobic exercise to now just lifting like dudes. And a lot of the time when you point that out, people tell you that there is no difference between men and women in terms of strength training or bodybuilding. And that's where I disagree. Because even though muscle is a quality that both genders want to develop, they don't want to develop them the same way. Meaning that it's correct that a woman is never going to look like a man, even if she trains like one, but that sort of should also tell you that there is no point in training like a man. Because if you're a girl and you're not super interested in developing the upper body, what would be the point of training the upper body 3 times a week? Your body, chances are, cannot even handle that amount of work and won't respond to that at all. So it's a waste of time. I think that we're going to see a development and evolution in the mentalities of people the more women join bodybuilding and powerlifting and what if, because more and more women are going to want to have programs and practices tailored towards their needs. They don't just want some random program made for a dude to be tossed on their lap and then to be told that they just have to stick to it because that's the only thing that works, or we already have created that, so that's what they have to deal with. No, it is very possible that the way we program can be fine-tuned to help women achieve their goals, prevent injuries, etc., etc. That is something that I might do as well one day, even though I only have 2% viewership that is female. I might make a program specifically for women so that you guys see what I mean when I say that there is a difference when we are talking about training for the two genders. Now, the second myth that the Sticky was obliterating is the fact that lifting weights is confusing. And I'm certain that a lot of you guys agree with that, especially if you got all of your information on YouTube Fitness. You at some point thought, okay, this guy said this, but this guy said that. Who do I trust? Who do I believe? And that is perfectly normal. You're a novice, you're a noob. You don't know any better. You don't have any knowledge yourself. So you're going to most of the time just listen to the first guy that opens his mouth. But then you're going to widen the range of knowledge that you get. You're going to follow more pages. And you're going to start getting contradicting information. And then you're at the crossroad because you cannot discern between the truth and what is essentially in your eyes a potential lie. And that is, of course, really annoying because you're trying to be optimal, you're trying to get stuff done properly, but now you're thinking, wow, maybe I just wasted my time following bad advice. Keep in mind one thing, and that is something that the sticky says as well. Any confusion you will feel doesn't come from the information, but the people presenting it. And that is an absolute truth. Whoever wrote the sticky understood the way YouTube fitness and fitness in general on the internet functions. It's what we call in French des guerres de chapelle. It's clans, it's tribes that are led by a YouTuber or a personality that has their own ideology about training and who tries to propagate it by saying that's the only thing that works, even though that's absolute nonsense, because pretty much everything works and nothing works at the same time. It's a paradox. But I can only think of a scarce amount of things that would result in absolutely no muscle gains in a novice. However, the more you fine tune and the more you grow, the more specific you have to be in your approach. And it's always interesting to see that when I get comments like this, the people who get annoyed and angry at the fact that I might contradict someone they used to listen to in the past tend to be novices. And that shows something. It shows that this confusion comes from a lack of experience. Because if you actually trained and lived it for yourself instead of just listening to people talk, you would be able to develop your own ability to think critically about training principles. The only people that, again, are constantly confused are the ones who absolutely never lived. But again, understand that this confusion is part of the game. The confusion is there because it forces you to pick a camp, right? You're confused between two options, so you're going to go with option B, and now you're part of this group, you're part of that agenda. I would tell you to not fall into that trap. Look at options and pick the one that works for you. It doesn't mean that the other option doesn't work, but you decided that for you it was the better choice. And since most of the seeming contradictions in the fitness are really just hair-splitting arguments that need not concern the beginner, you shouldn't worry about that too much because, again, keep in mind, just like the quote I presented to you, that all of the time when you see two guys who are going to say, oh, this is the best volume, and no, this is the best volume, it's not really about you, it's about them. They don't really care about giving you the best information in terms of volume because there is no such thing. Every single individual will need a different type of volume at a different frequency to grow. What they want is to be right. That's all that matters. For their ego and for their ability to sell products, they have to be correct because they make videos for people who don't think for themselves and have no experience. So if they lose the status as someone who is infallible, they're going to lose their audience. And that is, of course, never going to create any type of relevant information because it's all based, again, on ego. There's also the mention of hucksters peddling their garbage. That's number two in terms of confusing information on YouTube fitness. A lot of the time, guys are going to have a product in their lap that they receive from a company and they are going to think, okay, how do I find a way to sell this shit to my dumb subscribers? And the answer is most of the time going to be a gimmick. They're going to come up with a new invention, a new concept or whatever have you, that is going to force you to follow something you've never done before or even pay attention to something you never paid attention to before that worked perfectly, but they're going to tell you, oh, no. The way you did it was wrong and you were wasting your gains. So now you're going to take that product and you're going to have to think about that new variable and that is going to make the big difference. Problem is, it won't. The only thing it does is it's going to actually inflate their bank account and it's going to give you headaches. So keep in mind that one thing, lifting weights isn't confusing. It's actually very simple, especially when you get started. Then, when you advance, you have to learn more, you have to get smarter. But it takes time and it's not something you have to rush into. You don't need to get a PhD to be big. You don't need to get a PhD to progress. All of that is just, again, paralysis by analysis. You need to push it away. Muscle building is a very well understood practice. There's a few things that we refine, and of course, I'm also guilty of that. I like to delve into it. I like to complexify certain things, but it's more for the discussion aspect of the thing. When it comes to practicability, you can take 10% of that and you'll be good. Of course, the 90 other percent are the application. If you just listen to what I say or anyone on YouTube Fitness and you do nothing about it, well, again, you got 1/10 of the value of the information. Anything you learn, you must then experiment. That was myth number 2. And for now, I'm in accordance with the sticky, which doesn't surprise me because, as I told you, when it comes to documents on the internet about lifting and fitness, that's a good one. And keep in mind that it's free. It's not something you have to pay for. So again, if you never visited 4chan before, don't waste your time on the board or talking to the baboons that populate the pages. Just go straight to 4chan Fit, the sticky, and you'll see that all of this information is there. Now, let's talk about myth number 3, that it's possible to target fat loss. The fat loss target myth. This one is really ancient, actually, and was very present in the magazines. By the way, it still is. You'll still find magazines, especially targeted towards women, that are going to tell them that they can target their love handles or that they can target their fat rolls in the back, blah, blah, blah. All of that is, of course, nonsense. Because, as the sticky says, spot reduction is a myth. You lose fat all over your body. So you're going to find a way, either via caloric deficit or via an actual recomp, to trade fat for muscle, which is always the better way to go about it. It's usually bad to just lose fat. You always want to do both at the same time. It prevents stretch marks, it prevents loose skin, and it just makes you feel better overall. Plus, building muscle means that you need more calories to just maintain your weight, so it makes the weight loss much easier, but that's something I'm going to cover later on. So that's for the targeting of the fat. In the purest sense, it's idiotic to try to pinpoint one area of the body and think, oh, I just want to lose fat there. That's not going to happen. It's not effective. It's better to just look at it as a nuke, right? You want to get rid of 1,000 enemies. Don't contract a sniper. Just drop a nuke on the zone. That's much easier. Most of the time, you would be better off just losing body fat overall. And the zone that you want to target will be targeted by default. The truth with the target fat loss thing is that all of the time, people know that what I just say is correct, but they also realize that to do that, to lose fat globally, you have to make global efforts. So you actually have to do something that is strenuous and annoying to do because it takes efforts. You can stuff your face. So they think, maybe if I just target 1% of the body, I'll have to do 1% of the effort. Well, no, wrong. A lot of these creams that you rub on your abs or whatever to lose fat don't work. It's snake oil, but it's targeted at the lazy. However, I must say that beyond that, the idea that you can look at a certain zone and make it look better and make it look like you reduced the fat, that is possible. That I do believe is actually possible. And the way to go about it is to focus on the zone when it comes to muscular development. Because let's say you have, for some reason, fatty arms and you want them to look better. Well, of course, you could just lose weight overall. You'll lose fat there. But if you mix that and couple that with lifting weights, you'll build the muscle, the fat will have a larger area to actually disperse, and so it will make it look as if you managed to target fat loss, even though you didn't. You still have as much fat in the area, but it looks better. It's an illusion, and that is a technique that actually functions. Vascularization also works. If you target the area and you make it more vascular, guess what? It's also going to make it look less fat. And there is also a certain amount of evidence that if you work certain parts of the body, certain muscle groups, with longer series and higher sets and higher reps, you are going to trigger a certain amount of adipose tissue destruction, meaning that this particular area is going to, for some reason, lose fat at a higher rate. Now, is it significant? No, absolutely not. So for all of the people who are fat and we're going to do 1,000,000 crunches, it will do nothing, because if we're going to talk about potential, power, a natural diet that is going to make you lose fat is at a power of 100, and the target practice I just described might be at 1. But it's still something that can be applied for the people who actually want that extra 1. And for men who have TDs, that actually is something that functions, I have found. If you have lost a ton of weight, but you still have adipose tissue, okay, not gyno, but adipose tissue around the breast, what you can do is you can train those muscles so they're going to get bigger, and you can also work them with a pump. It is going to help with the aspect of the muscle and the aspect of the fat and the amount of fat you have in the area. But keep in mind that it's very minimal. So again, very slight thing that I want to add, just like the thing with women lifting weights. there are certain things that I don't agree with 100%. But the next one is particularly bad because that's the one point where I read it and I thought, this shows to me that lifting, even though we have figured out most of it, must still be pushed. We still need to research knowledge and think about things logically. Because even though we have that mountain of information and most of it is correct, and you, the noob, the novice, the skinny small guy, don't need to have all of the mountain to be perfectly able to actually gain muscle, it's still important that we go into the mines and we look at everything, because what we thought was gold might actually be copper. And in this case, the best advice is the following myth, that abs are made in the kitchen. A myth that the sticky fails to debunk. Actually, they double down and they say that yes, abs are actually made in the kitchen, which is something I disagree with on a primal level, because if you want to get abs visible without having to flex, you are never ever going to get that through just diet. The only way to do that is actually to train. And to a certain degree, it is true that if you want to get to the point where you can see your abs, you're going to have to lose fat, but it's only correct once you are at that level. It's just with the fat loss thing I described. Yeah, if you're a fat fuck and you have layers upon layers of fat on your abs, you'll never see them. So abs are made in the kitchen. But once you remove the fat, well, I mean, it's still muscles underneath. You still have to train them. So keep that in mind if you're the type of person who wants a six-pack. It will only come through work, or else you'll be like all of these dudes who have those tiny, shitty abs with no actual 3D effect, no pop, and who think that it's just genetics. It's not genetics, you just never trained the muscle. So it's normal that it doesn't pop. An actual ab muscle, if you turn to the side and you actually train them and hypertrophy them, they need to look like bread rolls. They need to poke out. There needs to be space in between the abs where you can fit your fingers. That's what happens when you actually have developed your abs. And this is where the sticky goes absolutely horrendously wrong. Because it sort of ignores the fact that, again, abs are muscles. And it gives horrible advice when it comes to training the abs. I don't know if the guy who actually wrote that stuff had a six-pack or not, but he seems to be the type of guy who is in love with the bulk and who doesn't mind not having abs, but it leads to him not understanding that the reason why he doesn't have any abs is not because he's big or bulky or whatever, but because rather he doesn't know how to train them. And working the abs absolutely makes them big. This is why when you tell people to just hold a heavy plate and do abs in the 5 to 10 range, yeah, that's the type of advice that will never get you abs, because it's the typical powerlifting mindset applied by people who are not powerlifters. I'm certain you understand where I'm coming from. There was a revolution at some point in the world of lifting where we shifted from bullshit bodybuilding principles to sort of sound powerlifting principles that then took over, and people just disconnected their brain and they did everything with powerlifting principles in mind because they thought that bodybuilding was not effective. They were correct because back then it was pro bodybuilding. But natural bodybuilding always knew that there were better ways to approach muscle building. Issue is that guy doesn't know that. So when he tells you to do 5 to 10 rep range ab exercises with a heavy plate, he's essentially giving you the same advice he would give you for squats or for bench. But it doesn't work like that. These are different movement patterns and they target different muscles. If you want to grow your abs, you have to train them frequent, with high volume, and I would recommend mid to low intensity. Going high intensity with abs is a recipe for disaster. It does nothing for you because it needs to accumulate a ton of tonnage over time. It's like the calves. It's the type of muscle that you're better off actually grounding in terms of volume and having high frequency on. So that is my advice to you if you actually want your six-pack. Now, I also want to continue some of the quotes to show you the idiocy of people who don't understand that no, abs are not made in the kitchen. So the sticky continues by saying that if your abs are covered in a layer of fat, any ab exercises you do are virtually pointless. That's not true. It's pointless in the sense that you will never see your abs like that because you have too much fat. But the muscle still grows. Just like if you do a super high bulk and you're covered in fat and you do chin-ups, for example, yeah, your biceps are not going to be veiny and huge out of that, but they still grow underneath the fat. Being in a surplus and super anabolic is a good way to build muscle. The only issue is that you're building a ton of fat with it that is not needed. But that is completely illogical. To believe that just because you're fat, doing abs does nothing. No, actually, it might be a good thing. You might work your abs when you're fat, then you cut down, and now you have very developed abs. That could be a way for people who, for now, want a bulky state to finally get a six-pack the day they decide to cut down. The second quotation is, having visible abs has very little to do with doing ab exercises, and ab exercises don't change the way you look. Now, we are reaching into the territory of the black pill now. I don't know what happened to the guy, if he had a seizure when he was writing this, or if he's just the type of guy who has a deep envy and desire for abs, but he just cannot build a nice six-pack, so he's decided that it's impossible. Yeah, every single muscle that you train is going to grow bigger. And every single muscle that is visible and developed is going to have to do with exercises. So saying that if you have visible abs, it had nothing to do with exercises is just completely illogical. It counters itself. If you want a six-pack, you have to train. But the reason why that type of person, that type of guy says stuff like this is because it makes him feel better about skipping abs. Because if training abs does nothing, and people who have six-pack abs didn't train to get them, then by default, if you flip the script, him not training abs is not the reason why he has no abs. You have to be very careful. It's the reason why I said also that for the confusion aspect of the thing, you always have to keep in mind that fitness YouTubers and influencers are human. There's an agenda behind their words, and all of the time the things they say are biased, and they're biased by their own experience, frustration, or prejudice. In this case, it's glaringly obvious. Every exercise you do that targets a muscle is going to change the way you look. So that is a mark. It's a red mark on the sticky because that's total fucking bullshit. Bad advice, and it's completely outdated. But funnily enough, you have to keep in mind that when that guy wrote this, it was sort of counterculture because for a large amount of time, it is true that the discussion around abs and body fat and diet was not super present, but it shows again that knowledge evolves with time, and I'm there to make it evolve even further. Now, this was for the myths. Let's discuss the mindset, because if there is one thing that is important for lifting weights, it's the mindset. And many people don't grasp that. That's the reason why also on this channel I try to motivate you and I try to find logical ways to get you to keep lifting. Because if you will just stick to training and diet, I think that we're missing a key component, and that key component is doing it. It's good to have all of the knowledge in the world, but if you never actually train or you don't stick to a diet, all of that is for nothing. So you need to develop a spirit of conquest. You need to always be willing to get it done. Let's see if the sticky gives actual good information in terms of that. Now, the first advice that the sticky gives you is that you cannot look at diet or exercise as a short-term ordeal that ends at some point when you aren't out of shape anymore. Hallelujah, that is absolutely true. If you jump into lifting, fitness, or whatever, thinking that you're going to be done at some point, like we're talking about folding laundry, yeah, that's not gonna happen. This is a lifelong pursuit, and any gain that you make on this will need to be maintained by hard work. Whatever you gain with work, you can keep with work, but you have to work to keep. That is also, in a sense, the payback, even though I can't even say that it's like a copay or anything, because it's great. It's going to keep you striving. It's going to keep you going afterwards. To me, I believe that if you could just train a muscle and then just be lazy about it, most people would have shittier physiques because they would never strive. They would get something that is mediocre or acceptable and they would stick to that. It's not as simple as that. You need to look at it as a lifelong pursuit, because if you don't, you're going to do like, I would say 70% of people do. You go to the gym, you train for 6 months, you get some mediocre results, then you quit. A year later, you do another 6 months, etc., etc. That is the best way to, again, get nothing of greatness ever accomplished. Number 2, when people start dieting and exercising, they are often extremists about it. Hate it, fail, then become lazy and fat again. Correct as well. And that's, of course, connected with the first one. The people think that you just have to get into it, be very intense, and then you're done. But that's the reason why they never get anywhere. They burn themselves out. They start way too aggressively and they go balls to the wall. Or you'll have some dude who has been eating burgers for the past 2 years and suddenly he's only going to eat salads. He's going to cut his calories by 2,000 and he's going to exercise 2 times a day. Yeah, what are the chances that the guy that used to be a slob is going to turn into a lifting Chad in the span of 2 weeks? It's impossible. And I've always believed also that the type of people who do that do it on purpose as a way to self sabotage, meaning that they go after it super hard, exprès, as we say in French, on purpose, because they know it's not doable. So then they'll have an excuse to say, well, it was too hard. No, it wasn't too hard. You made it hard on purpose. You just complexified the thing and you turn it into something impossible to surmount because then you can stop. It's much less painful to train like a madman for 2 weeks than to train like a normal person for 2 years. The person who trains for 2 years did 100 times more work than the person who just decided to go about it like a fucking kamikaze. And that is also an excellently sound advice. If you want to make a change, you have to make it incremental. You cannot change yourself in a day. It takes time. It follows that up also by saying that, as I presented, the goal is to make small incremental lifestyle changes that eventually add up, like the mountain I described previously, using the results as motivation to keep going. And I think that the result part is important too, because for the people, me included, when you get started, what keeps you going is the results. That is normal, we're human. If you went to your job and you got paid one day and then the next day you come in and you don't get paid, chances are you're not going to show up the next day because you show up to work to get paid. You show up to the gym for gains at first. After a while, you're going to go for mental stability because it makes you happy as a habit, etc., etc. But at the start, when you get started, if you want to get hooked on lifting, you have to get results. And if you never get results, you'll never stick to it. So those small incremental lifestyle changes are absolutely necessary. Trying to do something that requires tons of willpower is silly, and I agree with that as well. If you want to be someone who's driven and highly disciplined, that's possible. I became like that, but I wasn't like that at the start. I had to turn myself into someone who was disciplined, and the only way to do that is to start easy. If you try to start with the lifestyle of someone who is 5 years ahead of us, you're going to fail. And I think that it's something we could coin the David Goggins effect. All of the people who follow Goggins, if you know who he is, who is a super motivated guy, try to be like him day one. And they try to do the crazy stuff he did day one, then they fail miserably because of course, and then they think it's impossible, or they even start to resent self-improvement, and they think it's bullshit and it's all a lie and blah blah blah. No, it's because you tried way too hard, way too fast. It's the equivalent of jumping in the middle of the sea the first time you try to swim. Yeah, you're gonna drown, you're gonna die, buddy. You needed to start where you could actually touch the bottom of the sea and then walk up from there. It takes years. And again, I believe that the type of people who are going to try to climb the mountain the first day with bare hands and no shoes do that on purpose. Because that way they're going to climb up 1 meter, fall on their back like a turtle, and then quit forever. Don't do that to yourself. If you actually want to change yourself, start easy. That's going to be hard. That's the hardest part because you're going to have to start to climb a stair every single day and there's going to be no excuse. But at the end, you're going to turn back and you'll have climbed the mountain. That is how it's done. Eating healthy just has to become how you eat most of the time. Exercise has to become a habitual thing you do every day or two, like mowing the lawn or taking out the trash, which is the perfect example and description of what I just presented. It needs to be part of your life. It needs to be part of your schedule. For me, training is not something special. It's part of the schedule. I look at my schedule. It says work from this to this and train from this to this. That way, there's no questioning it. Just like you never question it whether you're going to eat lunch, for example, you shouldn't even have the time or the space to think whether or not you want to train. The answer has to be yes, because it's part of the schedule. And this is the power of habits. Once training becomes a habit, it is going to be much easier to never quit because habits are a part of us. It's a ritual that becomes a part of you. How many bad habits do you have? How many toxic habits did you develop throughout the years? If you manage to develop things that are negative for you, the opposite is also true. You have the power to develop habits that are positive, that are going to make you better. But the difference is that usually negative habits are pleasurable right out the bat, and positive habits are painful right out the bat. But the truth of the matter is that if you look at the evolution of these habits, a negative habit starts pleasurable, then over time snowballs into something painful. The opposite is true for habits that are actually positive. They start painful and they become pleasurable with time. So, if you integrate the idea that instant gratification is not the way to go, you will understand that the investment is to be put in the positive lifestyle changes. It might sound objectively, correct as I say it, but we both know that when you start doing it and it actually doesn't feel good and it feels painful, etc., you need to be reminded of the logical deal that you're engaging in. You're making an investment that on paper is correct, but in practice is going to sound and look horrendous. Well, ignore that. Ignore the physical sensation and focus on your reason and what it tells you, because reason always triumphs over sensation, always. And the last part about the mindset is the wrong thing done consistently nets more results than the right thing done sparingly. And that connects to the first advice, the advice about the confusing aspect of lifting. Even if you don't do things perfectly, it doesn't really matter. Just get it done. Because I can tell you that between someone who has the perfect workout designed by science that they paid some YouTuber $100 for, and a guy who just scribbled a few lines of chin-ups and push-ups on a piece of paper during classroom in high school and who does it at the park every day, the second guy will get more results and they will build a strong mindset. Going to your perfectly controlled environment gym once every 2 weeks to do ass to grass squats and then leg extensions is not going to get you anywhere. You need to summon the power of the mindset first and foremost. Then we can get fancy. Then we can shape your spirit. We can make you into an educated barbarian. But I've always found that it's always better to start with a base of discipline and the ability to get shit done, because after that we can talk about the way things are done. If you just start like this and you're constantly talking about the theory and how to do things, but you never do them, well, you missed the point. Again, it's like if you started learning a very advanced technique of swimming, but you don't even know how to float. It's not going to work. So in terms of mindset, the sticky got it done. Interesting, right? It's a little bit like it's connected to Sticky Ricky in a sense. The mindset prevails and the mindset is pure and particularly effective in that aspect, which is paradoxical because if there is one thing that I can say about people who spend their life on 4chan Fit is that they lack the mindset entirely, or if they have it, it's gimmicky. Like they're playing pretend on the internet about being a warrior or a Chad, but we both know that at the end of the day, they're skinny and they don't know how to train. So you clearly see a disconnect between the sticky and the people who post on the board that are supposed to have read this thing. And I think it shows one thing. Most people don't read the fucking sticky. Most people dodge the sticky altogether, and that's an absolute shame because as you have seen, it's mostly positive stuff. But it's not all there is to say about the document. There are still informations about diet and about training that I want to discuss with you guys. But I'm going to leave it for another time. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.